Hello, everybody who has returned to another episode of DevOps for Everyone. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And if it's your first time, you're in for a real treat today. I'm joined by two guys whose story is quite interesting, actually. I was introduced to them by John, who's also on the call now, a guy that joined recently. And it's quite exciting because we're talking about an exclusive today, which has never happened on DevOps for Everyone. So we're privileged and happy to have you. What I'm going to do is just give a really brief introduction, but I'll try and keep it brief because I know I'm not going to do it half as much justice as what you guys can. But if we start with the business is called Intelletive. And Intelletive is a member of the Cloud Native Foundation and also a KCSP, Kubernetes Certified Service Provider. If I've got it right, the business was co-founded in 2007 by both Jacob and Jason, and they're the Midwest's first independent KCSP, which is quite impressive, and one of less than 200 such certified providers worldwide. So quite a big achievement in the world of Kubernetes there, to be honest with you. Jacob and Jason both come with an engineering background, and we're going to be hearing about the Intelletive story, the vision, and then the reason why we're all here, exclusive announcement, which John was telling me one of its biggest appeals is that it's literally going to be a 10-minute install for even the most basic of Kubernetes users. So me, basically, which, and I think the confusing world of Kubernetes today and cloud native, I think is quite a big game changer. So like I said, brief, but that's all of it from me. I don't want to spoil the fun. I'll hand over to Jacob and Jason to make your introductions.
Yeah, well, I can kind of kick us off. So thanks for that, Joe. This is great. We're glad to be on and to talk a little bit about m9sweeper. So as you said, Jason and I own a consulting company here based out of Minneapolis that focuses on DevOps. So it's kind of perfect for us to be on. We kind of got started on this project about a year and a half ago, year ago. We'd been talking about this and we've been seeing this big transformation happening in DevOps in the last few years across the country, right? Across the world, really. And that's been Kubernetes, right? A lot of organizations are adopting Kubernetes. It has become, I like to describe it as like an operating system for a data center. And it's become really the predominant player in this space. We had a lot of other competitors, Docker Swarm, Mesos, many different cloud-specific vendor products. And Kubernetes is gradually beating them out. Something like 95% of Fortune 500 companies are using it. And it's growing every day. And so we had been building and implementing Kubernetes for clients. We became a KCSP, that basically shows that we have a number of certified Kubernetes administrators. And we determined that there was a big gap in the industry. We had been implementing some competitors' products that basically sell themselves as being able to secure your Kubernetes cluster to make sure that it is reliable and stable, but they hadn't really been delivering that. At least we didn't think so. We found they were very difficult to install, and the security teams never really used them. The DevOps teams would implement them, security teams would be afraid to touch them. And a lot of times they were so complicated to implement that they would take down production environments during deployments and upgrades, which ironically, you're supposed to be protecting against someone taking down your cluster. But if the product is too complicated, it sometimes does the opposite. So we built m9sweeper. It's not spelled like M-I-N-E, it's m9sweeper, right? Kind of like people abbreviate Kubernetes, K8s, right? K8s, same thing, right? It's a kind of fun abbreviation. And so it's really about just taking what people need in order to build a secure and compliant Kubernetes environment and making it accessible to the average team. I mean, one of the things we saw recently was, we keep encountering companies using Kubernetes that bring us in, and we find that they're using it in what we would call the most rudimentary ways, right? You go to a big conference and everyone's talking about how they've got service meshes and all these really cool tools, and they're using OPA and Gatekeeper. And then most of the clients we've been talking to in like average companies are like using, Azure or Amazon's Elastic Kubernetes service with like no Gatekeeper, no security, not properly firewalled. They're using it in some of the most rudimentary ways. And we recognized, man, we can really give them a product that's easy for the average company to actually use. And we can do that. And we started it during COVID. We were kind of launching as of last night at like 1 a.m. And so the product's working and it's out there. And Jason, do you want to talk to a little bit too on kind of that bigger vision than just purely security and kind of where we're taking the product?
Sure. So the idea here, as Jay kind of touched on before, is that a lot of different companies are they're adopting Kubernetes for a couple of reasons. A couple of the main drivers are developer velocity and reliability, site reliability engineering. And so what they find with that, they do get the developer velocity of that as you're able to build, and with containerized software, you're able to build and deploy software very quickly, especially with Kubernetes. But then they step back and see, well, what are we actually deploying? And with all the things going on, and with all the security breaches going on nowadays, some pretty major breaches going on, plus ransomware and all the things that are going on in the cybersecurity world, they really wonder what is being pushed out there. We have this velocity, but we don't really have an idea what's going out and how quickly it's going out. And so they look for security platforms like this to help them tie up those gaps. And what we found as we've implemented these for clients out there is that while they will scan your images and they will block deployments coming up, and that, as Jay kind of mentioned, is that they're very complicated. They're hard to implement. Nobody generally wants to touch them. They especially don't want to upgrade them in production. And so they really take away from the reason why you implemented a lot of this, why you made this huge investment in your company and all this infrastructure and this tooling and training up all your developers and everything. They take away from that velocity and that reliability. And so where m9sweeper kind of came out of was seeing that need for something that's lighter, but still does the job, and really focuses on the compliance and governance side of it rather than just strict security, because compliance and governance are really what the companies are trying to accomplish, and security is just a piece of that. And so that's where m9sweeper came from, and that's the purpose of it, and that's the need that we feel is in the market and why we built it.
Brilliant. And you said, Jacob, that's general availability as of 1 a.m. this morning?
Yeah, we actually we launched it last night. I don't know if we put the link up on the website. We probably should, but yeah, you can sign up now and get it.
We should say beta, not necessarily.
Yeah, not general.
Okay.
It's in a beta mode. It does work. It can install. We had been using it internally, but we had not had quite all of the Helm auto installation stuff set up. We're going to show you here in a minute. I'm actually going to time it when Jason does it, but we've got it set up now where. So we recognize that some of our competitors have a few years head start on us, right? And they've got more maturity on the security side, but what they don't seem to have is the ability to actually make a product that normal companies can use, right? That's easy to install. So we chose to really focus on core fundamentals of making implementation really easy and making it so that like we said, an average team of operations people supporting a Kubernetes cluster, right? An average DevOps team can generally use the tool and gain a lot of value out of it. And an average security team can gain a lot of value out of it. Our initial version is primarily focused on securing images that are running in a Kubernetes cluster and securing your Kubernetes cluster. But our next version, which will be coming out soon, is going to expand to use basically wrapping Gatekeeper and making it so that average companies can use Gatekeeper. Having a whole suite of tools around exceptions and management and things. But Jason, are we ready to start the demo? We might.
Sure.
We might. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have fun here. We're going to time and see how long it takes to get to a login.
And I'm going to butt in real quick and tell you that indeed it is on the website.
Oh, good. So we have a link.
While we're just waiting for that to load up, security. So as a recruiter talking to businesses or hiring managers, CTOs, CEOs of Kubernetes businesses, security is always the one that, yeah, he's gone. Security is always the one aspect that really comes up as, what they need in a DevOps engineer or site reliability engineer, somebody that understands the security aspects, because when somebody is adopting Kubernetes for the first time, or if they're scaling up, or if they're using part of the features that Kubernetes offers, security always comes as a day two thought, like an afterthought. By then it's a little bit too late, because they start panicking and then they start throwing more money at it. And then it's like, right, now we need someone that comes with a security background. So that I definitely can jump on board with your product to see where there's a gap in the market.
Yeah, and there's a number of areas that we want to target. Right now, we've only targeted one aspect, but there's so much we can target. The first aspect is the code you're deploying generally secure, right? So are you running images as root, right? Where if someone hacks your code, basically they can break out into the parent server and do anything they want, right? That's bad. The next thing is, do you have major known vulnerabilities, right? So it's kind of like Kubernetes best practices, and scanning to make sure your code doesn't have obvious vulnerabilities is like, it's really critical, but there's a huge gap there because most people don't know a ton about it. The Cloud Native Foundation recently did release a certification program, Kubernetes Certified Security Professional, or
that was at the last KubeCon, wasn't it? Or the one before?
Kubernetes Security. Yeah, and that's really great. And we both trained on it. We haven't actually taken the test yet, but we'll take it soon. But we honestly are basically, our goal is to take a lot of the things covered in the CKS and just create tools around it so that you can make average DevOps engineers who have a cursory knowledge of these things basically able to actually implement them, right?
And you know what that's going to do as well? On that point, I think that's really going to reduce the skills gap because, I mean, you're an SRE, right? Jason's an SRE. So you understand if you're recruiting for SREs that there is a huge shortage of this talent in the market. So if they've got a tool that makes their life so much easier, you can sort of open up your search a little bit and bring someone in who's got sort of foundational knowledge to be able to still do the same job.
Yep, that's right. And one of the wonderful things about really where we're at right now is that a lot of these tools are readily available, but for things like scanning for Kubernetes best practices around having role-based access control enabled and having, not allowing things to run as root and that sort of thing. These kinds of tools for scanning best practices are available. The problem is there's a skills gap, like you said, where people don't know how to use them. And so what we want to do is kind of wrap a lot of these tools that are out there and these best practices that are already established, wrap them in a easy to use tool that can help you monitor and report on all of these pieces. So now, if you start out, Jason, on m9sweeper.io, we can kind of show people from there where they can go. So they can start on m9sweeper.io, and then if you scroll to the bottom, there's a sign up link. And it'll take you perfect right here. And you can sign up. Now, Jason's already signed up, so he's going to read that. But if you go click here to sign up, you can walk through a sign up. It's very quick. Yeah, I'm going to start our timer, Jason. So you just go as fast as you can. He's going to log in. So you can go through the sign up, verify your email, but he's already done that. So he'll just do the installation. You get in, you click a new Minesweeper installation. You fill out a name, and he's going to walk through a series of settings here. We don't require every setting to be filled out. So he's going to go with the easier settings, basically specifying the URL, and you'll see we give away a free tier license. And Jason, do you need SSL on that or not for this demo environment?
We didn't set up the SSL unless we just threw up a cluster in AKS in Azure quick to be able to demo this. Yep.
All right, nice. So now he's going to run through these. Now, not all the settings are required, but see we have things like SMTP settings because we have different kinds of alerts that can go out if we detect vulnerabilities. Database settings, we by default deploy everything, all of its dependencies from Postgres to a message queue, but you have the ability to go and use your own if you want to have more persistence with your data. So for a non-prod environment, it's fine, but for prod, you probably want to, have a managed database outside of Kubernetes or with shared storage or something. Great. And then when you're done, it generates this one-liner command that you can basically copy paste into a command prompt. And he's going to go do that. And basically it'll install the whole thing. So it took him he's on 1 minute and 25 seconds. And now it's he's already started the deployment. Now, Helm is a tool we expect most SREs are familiar with it and using it. It basically, at its most basic level, it's like a template for Kubernetes config. You pass in a number of variables and it'll template out the config and do a deployment. It also has some state management where it can track deployments and track their changes. So you'll see it'll deploy here. It's going to create whatever it needs.
Basically, once it's installing right now. It's installing the database and everything right now. And as we said right here, is this page will actually automatically detect when it comes up in your cluster and let you know when it's complete.
Yep. So you'll notice there about 6 lines down, it's got a license key, and it uses that license key and instance key, which it auto-generated. It's a free license at this point. And it takes that license and instance key and essentially phones home when it's installed saying, I'm alive. And then that's how we know that it installed successfully. So that's going to be, it's pretty quick. How long is it usually, Jason?
It takes a minute just because we have a Postgres database coming up and all that. So, but it's going to happen here pretty soon, I think.
Yeah.
It looks like it's just over a minute here right now.
Nice. So we'll see. I know John said 10-minute install, but we've been able to get it down to less than 10 minutes. We'll see if we can hit 5 minutes here. So we're 3 minutes in and it's doing its install. So that's cool. Now, when it comes up, it's basically going to phone home and say, I'm alive. And then it's going to scrape what's currently running on the cluster. And we got a demo cluster with a couple apps running on it.
We're up, Jake.
What's that? Oh, it's done. Nice. So,
so at this point, you should
3 minutes and
click on this.
Look at that.
And we're at a login screen.
And he's got that same user account you had.
This is the one that I entered in to set up as my first admin user in the cluster. And maybe I got my password right.
So we had the install and it came up to a login prompt in basically 3 minutes, 3 minutes and 10 seconds, depending on how much time you count us talking. So basically it's a 3-minute install. That's not bad.
You can see that we already have results. It's already scanned. It's already scanning all the images in the cluster. We already have results. So this would be one of the images. You can see all the CVEs that are in this image.
So a CVE is essentially a government, there's a government database of all the major vulnerabilities that are known. So it scans, we're using a tool here to scan basically all the vulnerabilities that are known by, it simply looks at the packages that are installed in the libraries your applications use and matches them against a government database of known vulnerabilities and gives you a report. You'll notice some of these are not fixable. So it'll consider it compliant even though it has vulnerabilities. Some of them have no vulnerabilities that are detected. Kind of depends on the project. So it's cool. So it automatically scanned everything and essentially reported. So when it comes up, it phones home, says I'm online, and then it also populates a database. It connects to your Kubernetes cluster that it's installed on and gives you a list of every single thing that's running and then triggers scans on all of them. So that's cool. And we can add more clusters too. The software has the ability to have a whole bunch of clusters that it's managing with a single install, or you can do a install per cluster. So, but yeah, this is cool. So yeah, 3 minutes.
We were able to scan the whole cluster in what, under 4 minutes, something like that?
Yeah, so it booted up in 3 minutes and then it scanned. Now we didn't have much in this demo cluster, but it scanned it all, yeah, in just a few, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and gave you a report. And then we have dashboards. If you go to the summary dashboard, Jason, we can show them, it'll populate out. Now scans per day, of course, there's no data there, no historical data, but yeah, it gives you some of the breakdowns by namespace, as well as some audit trail and audit history stuff there. So that's cool. And then if you go to workloads, I don't think we have Gatekeeper on this cluster, so we can't show that one, but you can see your workloads by namespace and what you've got running. Click on any of them and see your reports. So nice. Kubernetes metric server was compliant. Oh, beautiful. You can trigger a rescan if you need to too in the top right corner, and it'll rescan it usually pretty quick. Sometimes it takes a bit longer if it has to refresh the index of vulnerabilities. So we'll see. Maybe it'll finish in 5 seconds, or maybe it'll be a minute, but it's usually pretty quick. Yeah, so that'll keep going. Yeah, so that was quick. So what do you think? I mean, Joe, that's a 3-minute install. Is that fast? That's faster than we thought it would be. That was pretty good.
I mean, yeah, you've cut it down by half, and I've just thought of the title for when I post this video online: 3-minute install.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. So
yeah, Jacob, I know you were saying about it's for DevOps teams, it's for SREs, for people that are don't have to be Kubernetes experts to use this tool, but when you set this up and looking at this now, who would be your typical target customer? Because you have to have a target customer. You can't just say everyone, right?
Yeah, so we're basically doing a freemium model, and here's our thinking: is if you're I guess it's a big thinking, but basically, if you're a small business, we have a free tier that small businesses, small to medium-sized startups and things can use that's basically free. And they're not our target customer, but we'd love it if they used it, right? We want the feedback. We think that the community needs this tool. So for those smaller businesses, it's free, right? Now, certain features are behind a paywall. Although all the features that are available now here are essentially not behind the paywall, but future features we'll be adding that are around compliance in a larger organization will be behind a paywall. And those things, really our target customer is Fortune 10,000, right? So we're really going after, with the larger compliance features where we're taking the product, is we're going after your larger organizations where you have more than 2 or 3 development teams, right? Where you need the ability to set rules across an organization and be able to monitor what different teams are doing. You want, as Jason touched on, you want those developers to have a great deal of velocity and independence, but you also want to give them some kind of boundaries to make sure they're doing a good job and they're not introducing vulnerabilities, right? The classic problem is you end up with a large organization with 20 or 30 software dev teams, and now they're all really productive with Kubernetes because they can do everything on their own, but they're shipping all kinds of major security vulnerabilities. They've got software that hasn't been updated in 2 years because they now don't have a central team telling them they have to update everything.
Yeah.
Right? Running Java 1.7, right, in production. And so, they got Bitcoin miners running on stuff. And so you gotta have some way of saying, like, we're going to monitor what's running there. We're going to alert you if we discover that there's a vulnerability. We're going to give you a timeline to respond to that and fix it. I think we're the only one, Jason, that does that, right? Where we automatically can discover a vulnerability and create like a temporary exception with a discussion and comment stream where they can discuss the issue, right?
As far as I've ever seen, yeah, I've never seen another platform that allows for like an actual compliance workflow. It's either block new deployments for coming up. I've actually seen one that just if it discovers a CVE that breaks your policy in production, it actually could shut down, like just scale the deployments to 0. So basically take the software offline, which seems to be a very nuclear option. I don't think we've ever worked in any environment where the business didn't want their software up and didn't allow for some time for software developers to address issues. Usually there's a business need for the software to actually be up and running. And so that's where our thinking came in. That is when you see here is that you're always going to, inevitably you're going to have some CVEs and software, especially over time, even if when you actually built the software, there was no known vulnerabilities, there can become known vulnerabilities. And a lot of policies, actually, you can see that, in the CVE database, there's the notion of whether it's fixable or not, which means has the vendor released a fix for it. So a lot of organizations will build their policy and governance around, we'll allow CVEs if there's no fix available, because we're not going to block the software from going out. And then so what will happen is when the developers actually delivered it to production, at the time they delivered it, there might have been a CVE, but there wasn't a fix available. Since then, since they've put it in production, the vendor released a fix. Now, technically, you've become non-compliant at that point. Some other platforms out there will just start blocking your deployments at that point. And so that's where we've you can see here that we can request an exception to blocking the deployment or blocking these pods from coming up. And as a time-based exception that, as Jake mentioned, can have an actual compliance dialogue with your InfoSec team or whoever's managing this workflow. We can have a running dialogue around that. And this is key in a compliant environment. A compliant environment doesn't necessarily say that you can never have a CVE in production. It just means that it has to be well documented. And usually a timeline of when it should be fixed or how it's going to be addressed, and that audit trail. And so that's what we're providing here rather than just blocking deployments. And that's why we add a lot of value to an actual compliant environment as opposed to just heavy-handed security. And yeah, go ahead, Jake.
I was going to say too, one of the things we're adding soon is the ability to have it automatically create exceptions for particular namespaces when a vulnerability is discovered, but with like a 7 or 14-day time span. So it doesn't just start killing things in production when it detects an issue. Rather, it notifies all of your security team, your administrative team, so your SRE and security SecOps team, right? And says, hey, I discovered this really big problem in production. You have 7 days to dig into it before I stop blocking things, right? Or before I start blocking things. Yeah, it's that grace period right there. So you have the ability then to basically allow the team to fix things before you start killing things, which, as Jason said, is that compliance workflow, which none of the competitors seem to have, which seems really odd to us. But I think we come from a different perspective because we're the people who actually have to implement it for companies. And so we have, we're like our own users. We eat our own dog food in a way. And so we have a pretty good idea of what you need to do to use this in a practical environment. Yeah, so as you saw, like super easy install. And where we're going with this thing, we have so many ideas around integrating and helping teams, basically helping average DevOps people basically be above average, right? Helping them basically be able to play that SecOps role or support the SecOps team. Because really, like Jason said, compliance and SecOps, you're to some extent making business decisions around what's the level of risk here, but you need the tools to have the insight to know what decisions you ought to be making. And then you need the tools to be able to dig in and actually implement those decisions to say, I'm going to allow this for a month. Hey team, you have a month to go fix your code, right? Or this vulnerability is so severe, I really do want to take it offline. And so I'm going to take down this credit card processing portal temporarily until we fix the vulnerability. But there has to be a workflow there, and that's what we're trying to provide. And something that, again, is accessible to average teams, not just a bunch of, 180 IQ ex-Google employees. So.
Yeah, fair enough. So is this, just for me to understand, is this a product or something that people can go and install and run with, or are you still going to be offering like a service in the background that guides them through everything from start to finish?
Yeah, so this is a product that anybody can go sign up and start using, the free tier especially. And we are a consulting company, so if you pay for the paid version of it, which you basically right now have to reach out to us because we focused all our efforts on product, not on billing.
Yeah.
And which I think is the right decision. And if you want more support, yeah, reach out to us. And we have a consulting company behind the product company that can do the consulting work to basically help you implement it or help you do a security audit or whatever. This does not cover every aspect of Kubernetes security, obviously, right? It is the basics, and we will continue to build out more and more functionality around Kubernetes security and Kubernetes compliance, helping organizations be better, right? But we do this work every day in a consultative basis and have done so for a good deal of time now. So the hope here is that we've got a product that people can use that are good for the SMB and even large enterprises. And long term, we want to take more and more of what we've been doing as consultants and build it into this product. So this product can make our lives as consultants easier and make our customers' lives easier and really just help the community at large. I mean, I heard just this morning, largest meat processor in the United States basically got hacked, and 20% of the beef and cattle industry is just like gone, right? We gotta, security is important. It's a social need as well as a technical need. So we're hoping that people can start using it and giving us feedback. And for larger organizations, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to help.
Yeah, because the reason I asked that is, you get organizations that want products or want services like this, but they still want to feel that level of ownership on their infrastructure or the ownership of their tooling or their services or whatever. But at the end of the day, when you've got a product that you've built and you're the experts in, you still need to have that level of sort of sophistication behind it just to be able to guide someone through, I don't know, any part of the install, any part of the upgrade, any part of the maintenance, right?
Yep, and that's what's nice about, that's why I say, like, your smaller organizations, yeah, go use free tier, right? Mm-hmm. Your larger organizations, your Fortune 10,000, Fortune 5,000s, the pricing's not that crazy expensive. It's lower than a lot of our competitors, but still good enough that it's worthwhile to us. And then you get that professional added support, right? It just makes sense. If you're in a larger organization, it just makes sense to basically, work with us on using it as a paid product, because security is so important right now. And because it's just so, obviously we don't have to go over this, but there's tons and tons of companies getting hacked because of really basic things. I mean, what was it? SolarWinds had an old password, right? Right, Jason? That was their thing. It was like, it's obvious things, right? And it's things that tools like this can solve for you, right? Password rotation or not running as root, or not deploying things with obvious major security vulnerabilities. It seems basic, but most people aren't doing it right now. So
yeah, well, that's where the best ideas come from, when you see a gap, and like you just said, you seem like you've got an edge over your competitors, so you found a niche and focused on it. So without putting you on the spot, or maybe purposely putting you on the spot, when do you go from beta to GA?
good question. Jason, what are your thoughts?
I think we've been roughly, it kind of, obviously it kind of depends on the feedback that we get from it. There's probably issues that we don't know about yet, and that's why we're calling it a beta so far. Our rough thinking is probably this fall, probably somewhere end of Q3, middle to end of Q3, hoping we can have it polished up. We're starting to work pretty hard on the next phase of it, which is the actual governance enforcement that Jake mentioned, with an integration with Gatekeeper. And Gatekeeper is a really, really nice tool. But again, it's very difficult. Writing Rego code has been one of the most mind-numbing things I've probably ever done.
I read on the, do you know what? It's funny. I've actually got a quote here that I read on the website that you said you started m9sweeper because you wanted to make sure that nobody would ever need to write Rego code ever again.
Right. Yeah. It's hard, but it's a very powerful tool at the same time. There's a lot of demand for compliance and governance, and m9sweeper really starts to get into and enable governance in a fast moving environment with constant change, and really be able to enforce that. And so that's where we're going to start working on next. Like I said, it'll kind of depend on the feedback that we get on this first piece here with the CVE scanning. Just how quickly we want to go GA with it. But we're really excited to keep working on it and moving towards that, though. And hopefully in the next few months, we'll have a full platform out there, production ready.
And to add to that whole Gatekeeper integration, the way it's going to basically work is we're going to have a library of pre-made policies, basically, with basically drop downs and fill in the blank kind of options, where you basically can say, hey, I want to only allow people to deploy, like, here's an example. I want to make sure that people have health checks on everything that they deploy, right? I don't want people deploying things without health checks. Well, you could basically pull that policy off. We might have different options, like these kinds of health check methods are allowed, or whatever, right? And you add all of those, and then basically you hit save, and it'll go and template out your Rego code, so you don't have to write any Rego code. And then the other thing that we saw a big gap on is with vanilla Gatekeeper, it's very difficult to say, well, that's all good and fine, except these two business units have a legitimate business need to basically do things that aren't allowed anywhere else, right? And so we've found that a lot of the examples that are out there made by Google and other kinds of companies, they have some really nice Gatekeeper example repos. The problem is they don't really make it very easy to do exceptions. And even doing exceptions—
without writing more Rego code, which is,
you're modifying.
It's very hard to maintain.
Well, and it's hard too, because like Rego code has to access like other data about things to get the answer that it needs. And it's all got to, like, between the different function calls, it's all got a wire writer. It doesn't quite work. It implies a lot of relationships. It's a very confusing language. And so what we're going to do is write ones that are already pre-designed to be easy to do exception management. And then we're going to have it actually template out all of your exceptions into Rego code for you, so that you don't have to do that. So you actually have then a way to manage it. Plus, with the timing thing here, where we can have expiration dates on exceptions, you could literally say, like, I'm going to allow this business unit 2 months to be in violation of this Gatekeeper policy. And you can't even do that in vanilla Rego that I can think of. It's very hard anyway. So there's a lot of things that we can do there that just are, making Gatekeeper accessible to the masses, making it so you can basically in a GUI say, I want to enable these 5 policies, and I'm going to have exceptions for these, namespaces or business units effectively in my organization. And it'll just make it so, and it'll give you, some dashboards and things, giving you compliance and metrics around Gatekeeper. But again, just making it accessible. I mean, you would not believe how many teams we know are like, yeah, Gatekeeper, awesome. And then they try to use it, and it just never gets finished. So,
yeah. So just before I throw it across to the participants for any questions, there might be some people on there that have got some questions. Jason, are you finished with the demo?
Oh, yeah. Yep. I can stop sharing here.
Cool, that's fine. I've done that. So yeah, just before I throw it across to the participants, if anybody did have any questions, I just wanted to follow on from the last question, which was about, going from beta to GA. By the end of the year, so I mean, we're halfway through now. So in the next, say, 6 to 9 months, where do you hope m9sweeper will be? What's the plan?
So our goal is to add the gatekeeper and compliance integration in the next 3 to 6 months, launch that. And then at that point, we're going to be kind of just aggressively ramping up sales, aggressively growing that base. We think that when you have the gatekeeper management and the CVE scanning, then you have really a really solid product. And I guess our goal is to be really, a post-revenue startup with a number of customers using it and just kind of solidly growing maturity to the product, right? It is still pretty new. So it's just all about finish the gatekeeper integration and then basically just grow the bottom line, right? Grow the number of customers and really evangelize. We hope to be doing some conferences and things. Hopefully conferences will be in person by then. So we can start going out and speaking and doing presentations like this one, where in 3 minutes we install it and suddenly you're implementing gatekeeper policies. And I'd love to in 3 to 6 months do another one of these kinds of things where it's like, well, 3 minutes to install it, 10 minutes to overlay gatekeeper policy, right? Can you imagine, right, where organizations are now and being able to do that in, 10, 15 minutes? It would be unheard of. So, but entirely achievable. Yeah. So that's kind of where I've got the vision. Jason, what are your thoughts? Same or?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. That's kind of what we hope to do is focus on the gatekeeper, solidifying what we have here, getting it GA ready and production ready, where we would trust it in a large scale environment, to of course not take away from the velocity and reliability, which is the whole point of all these tools. So we have to get it to that point. Bring in the gatekeeper integration and policy management with the exceptions and all that, then yeah, just start looking at doing some sales as far as, speaking at conferences and start to educate other teams out there and organizations out there of how accessible some of this technology is to them, even if they don't have, like as Jake said, the X team of Google engineers that wrote all this stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it's good to know you're both on the same page with that. So just before we sign off, if there's anybody that wanted to take themselves off of mute and ask either Jason or Jacob a question, or put it in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that before we log off, just wait a couple of seconds. Oh yeah, the website. So the website, guys, is m9sweeper.io. There we go. So if everyone can see that in the chat, m9sweeper.io. But if there's no other questions, where can people contact you if they did have any follow-up questions after this?
Yeah, good question. There's a contact page on the site. That's the easiest way, or else they can just hit up Jason or I on LinkedIn. Don't mind that as well. But the benefit of the site obviously is LinkedIn meters how many people you can reach out to. So the site's easier, right? Yeah, happy to field questions, happy to help people, advise teams on security or whatever way we can help, right?
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well, everybody, that was the 3-minute install. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time and sharing us today. Like I said at the start, I genuinely believe that this is going to be a whirlwind for you guys. So I look forward to following the journey. Maybe we catch up in 6 months' time and you're telling me about all the customers that you've signed up.
Yeah, I hope so, man.
Wonderful.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, John as well in the background here, thanks very much for organising and help to set this up. I appreciate it. It's been really good.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
No worries. Well, last word from me then, guys. I wish you a good day. It's my evening now, so I'm going to start wrapping up, and I'll catch up with you guys in a few months' time, and I'll be sure to tag all of you on the video once it's live in about 48 hours on my LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
no worries.
Joe, for the opportunity.
No worries. Thanks a lot, guys, and thanks everyone for attending. All the best.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.